Daniel was a pretty young engine, but had a varied past. When he was first built, he'd been a shunter at Old Oak Common, before being a station pilot at Paddington. From there, he'd been moved to a branch line in Wales, where he was used on short passenger trains. On the Stovell Valley Railway, Dan had been drafted in to pick up his branch line duties on a spur of the line called the Revborough Heath branch. It started at Forley Junction and headed through a few cuttings before passing through Revborough and then a mile on to the Heath. This line could be challenging at times with a steep gradient of 1 in 45 for 100 metres from Revborough to the level of the Heath. This gradient had always been a struggle for Daniel and his 4 coaches, but he had sometimes been given help by Vaughan. Dan was getting worried because this was becoming a more regular occurrence. His short freight duties and passenger services were being increasingly delayed between Forley and Revborough. Lord Stovell, who was none the wiser about Dan's problems, decided that action was to be taken and arrived at Revborough Shed behind Stan one late morning. He got out and walked over to Dan, who was resting in between duties. "Daniel, I'm disappointed in your performance lately. You've been late far too often these past couple of weeks, and this has caused disruption to Vaughan's services too, because he's been called out every time you end up stopping or causing delays. What is going on?" Dan looked hesitant and glanced at Stan, who could only look at the floor. "I think I'm getting past my useful life, sir. I'm old, and I just can't handle the gradient on the line. I do try ever so much." "May I put in a word for him, sir?" "No, Stan, keep out of this." "Dan, I want you to try harder, and if the problem persists, we'll have to see what's going on again." "Okay, sir." Dan looked thoroughly miserable. Lord Stovell walked away and got back onto his train. Stan looked at Dan and tried to comfort him. "I don't think he'd send you away if something went wrong, Dan. You're too important, and who could take over the running of your line anyway? He could easily bring in something else Great Western, like a 1400. They're more modern and have less fuel consumption than me. They'd deal with this line better than me. I just wish I could prove to him that I can still be useful even though I'm kind of getting old and quite slow. I'm sure you'll think of a way. You won't let us or Lord Stovell down." With that, Stan rolled away back towards Forley, leaving Dan to ponder over his position on the railway. Over the next week or so, he was only helped by Vaughan once. He was determined to show Lord Stovell that he wasn't going to be replaced or removed from the railway. One day, however, he was feeling a pain in his conrods. His crew checked him over but couldn't find any noticeable problems. Therefore, they took Dan down to Forley Junction for the first connection train of the day. He sat in the platform and pondered. The pain in his conrods had subsided slightly, but he was still worried. Stan arrived with its connecting service. He was still worried about Dan's problems and had been thinking about how to help him. Stan didn't like to see the engine so depressed. "How are you feeling today, Dan?" "Even worse, I'm afraid. My comrades are so painful today, it feels like they want to snap." "I don't think you should really be working, mate. This is quite serious. I mean, you and 4 coaches, plus a 1 in 45 bank, and aching conrods isn't really a recipe for something good." "Who would take my job, though? You're busy in the mornings with the milk and passenger trains, Vaughan is busy on his stopping passenger services, and Stuart is either asleep on the mail or on the heavier of the stopping passenger services. I shouldn't complain. I have hardly any work compared to you. I literally run up and down with some coaches and stay up slightly later to bring the short mail train down to meet Stuart. Apart from that, I have an easy life." "I don't think so. You have an important job. Just think what the Retford Ramblers would do without your service. They're always starting out from Revborough Heath on their walks around the moorland. And the people of Revborough itself, they'd have no way of getting to Stowborough or Retford without your service. It's a 20-minute walk from Revborough to Forley on a good day." "I guess so, but I've let them all down so much recently. I'm getting old, Stan." Don't worry yourself about it too much. I'm sure something will come up." Dan didn't share Stan's optimism. Stuart raced past the 2 engines on a fast freight before Dan got the signal and he departed, Stan following shortly after. Dan hauled his 4 coaches around the line and soon stopped at Revborough. The pain hadn't subsided. He looked up at the bank. His driver got out of the cab and spoke to him. "Look, lad, we'll give it our best shot. If we don't make it, I've arranged for the guard to let us roll back down the hill to here, where we'll put you back in the shed and think what to do next." "Okay, driver, I'll give it my best shot. The pain is really getting rather too much, but we need to get there. We'll all give it our best shot and go gingerly so we can make sure you don't destroy yourself." Dan's driver got back onto the footplate and gingerly he got Dan going. He picked up some speed before hitting the incline. The pain in Dan's conrod started to progress up and up. Dan was finding it harder to get up the gradient with every turn of his wheels. He was about halfway up the hill when the inevitable happened. The pain in Dan's conrods got overbearing and he stopped. "Driver, the pain, it hurts so much. It feels like my conrods are going to snap." "It's okay. We'll head back down. We'll check you over when we get there." Dan's train gently coasted back down to Revborough. His passengers disembarked, and seeing it was the Retford Ramblers, they took heart in the situation and walked up the hill to their starting point. Dan only just managed to get into his shed, where his crew inspected him and found shocking cracks in his conrods. "You were lucky we stopped when we did. If we'd gone on, I think we actually would have snapped them." "When was the last time you had your conrods changed?" They're my originals. I've never had them changed." "Well, that explains a lot. I think it's about time you had a change." "Oh, but they're my originals." "Yeah, look where they've got you. I tell you what, I'll get hold of Lord Stovell and we'll see what we can do." With that, Dan's crew started to dismantle his conrods. They'd just finished when Lord Stovell arrived behind Vaughan. "I got a telephone call from your guard. I heard about what happened." "Yeah, you're not going to believe it, but these are his original conrods, which explains why they've finally given out." My, that's quite some achievement, to keep them for this long, but I guess you've never had such loads of ingredients to deal with, and over time they must have been damaged. I'm going to order some new conrods to be made at Stowborough for you immediately." "Oh, but what about my originals? I have become rather fond of them, sir." "I'm sure they can be restored to working order and used as spares. They may have to be put in storage for a while, though." Lord Stovell saw Dan's face drop again. "Better than having them thrown away completely, isn't it?" "I suppose so, sir." "May I remind you, sir, of our conversation with Stan?" "Ah, yes. It has also been decided that the loads you take along here are rather too long for you and the line. Your 4-coach service can easily be covered by 2 coaches. Therefore, I'm investing in a special 2-coach rake to be made for you and this line. They're going to be proper colic coaches and will fit in with your size and this branch very well. It should sort out your weight problems too." Dan's face lit up with this news. "Thank you very much, sir. That's quite alright. Now I'm hoping for the coaches to be with us within a week or so, and by then your new conrod should be done and you should be ready." With that, Lord Stovell climbed back into Vaughan and went away, leaving Dan and his crew to talk excitedly about his new parts and coaches. 1 week later, Dan was sitting in the workshop at Stowborough. He was getting his new conrods fitted. They glinted in the low sun. He watched Dan as he left the station, and then Stuart, who arrived into the yards with 2 coaches. "Hello, look what I have." "Oh, they look very nice." The new colic coaches looked marvellous in chocolate and cream. Dan was very pleased. Stuart potted his way around the yard until he stopped in front of Dan in the workshop. Lord Stovell jumped out of his cab and spoke to Dan. "I hope you like your new coaches, Dan. They're yours and no one else will be able to use them." "Oh, they are very nice, sir." Good, good. Now, from what I've been told, you're just about done. So, in 30 minutes, I would like you to take a service from here to Revborough. Then you can continue your normal services from Fawley Junction to Revborough Heath." "OK, sir, I'd be delighted." Lord Stovell chuckled and went away to his office, while Stuart went away to continue his jobs. Half an hour later, Dan was sat in the station with his new coaches. He was ready to depart on his first journey. The guard's whistle blew and he was off. He had no problems with this small load, and was quite able to make the gradient out of Castle Stovell. He pulled into Fawley Junction where Stan was waiting for him to arrive. "Hey up, looking very suave there, Dan." Dan chuckled. "Oh, you really think so? I'm rather pleased with this." "I should think so too, old boy. What did I tell you about not worrying? Lord Stovell wouldn't have got rid of you." "Thanks for speaking to him about it, though." "That's alright. What are friends for, eh?" Dan smiled as he left the station, confident that things, for him, were looking up.